In this video, I will help you spend wisely. What I mean with that is I will help you recognize which input devices are good and which ones are just, say, well marketed. We have here different mouses, we have different keyboards, I have a wrist rest, and I will show you also some devices which I don't have here, which are only online. Okay, let's start with the keyboard. You see, mainly you will find different types of keyboard. This is a Logitech compact keyboard. Compact means that it does not have a numeric keypad. This one has a numeric keypad. So what's the difference? Well, the difference is of course the width, but what impact does it have? Well, the impact of having a wide keyboard is if I'm centered with respect to the B key, which is the space bar, the mouse will be quite far to the right. And as the mouse is quite far to the right, my elbow will be far away from the side of my torso, which means strain in the shoulder joint and at muscle level in the upper trapezius and in the supraspinatus. Okay, so having a compact keyboard helps you keep the mouse close to the midline of your body, i.e. helps you keep your elbow alongside your torso. Now all this depends on the use case. If you're a business analyst, the numeric keypad is not a secondary accessory for you, it's super important. And therefore, having the mouse a bit far to the side can be the price to pay for keeping this part of your keyboard, which helps you be so fast in typing numbers. Okay? In this case, if you're a business analyst, it can be worth learning a few keyboard shortcuts so that you don't use the mouse too much. You may have seen some keyboards that are not straight, but that are angled. Yeah, the two halves form a slight angle. The goal of this keyboard is to correct what we call the ulnar deviation, which is the deviation of your wrist in direction of the fifth finger. Yeah, this deviation is due simply to the fact that when your hands are together, well, they cannot both be on the same line without twisting your wrists. The risk of such keyboards is that people don't react by straightening the wrist, but react by spreading their elbows. If this happens, the keyboard creates more problems than it resolves. But if you use them well, it's perfectly fine, provided that the angle is not too big. Now, many people have asked whether they should use a wrist rest or not, and that will be the same for the keyboard and for the mouse. You see, the wrist rest is meant to avoid pressure on soft tissues, such as your carpal tunnel, for example. So, if you want to use a keyboard wrist rest or a mouse wrist rest, rule number one is that you should not rest on it, not lean on it. You should float on it. Okay, that is to avoid pressure here, but that is also because of this other reason. Look, your elbow is meant to move your hand in the horizontal plane, whilst your wrist is meant to move in the vertical plane. Okay, if you really rest or lean here, well, the elbow is locked, and therefore the wrist will go like this sideways, which is called ulnar and radial deviation, and that is a source of tendinitis both in the wrist and in the elbow. As you don't want that, you really don't want pressure here. You want to preserve the mobility of the elbow. Does it mean that a wrist rest is dangerous? No, not at all. It depends on how you use it. It can actually be quite good to have a wrist rest because, you know, it helps keeping my wrist straight. Here, I will, with my hands on the table, I will tend to have a wrist extension, which puts a lot of pressure in the carpal tunnel and on the wrist extensors in the elbow. This is where you have the tennis elbow. So at least when I have a wrist rest, I'm sure that my wrists will be more straight. Now, a wrist rest on a desk which is slightly too high will just make the problem worse and will make me spread my elbows. I don't want that. The other thing that you should be aware is that you don't want the wrist rest to be thicker than the keyboard. Otherwise, you have your hands going like this, and this is neither comfortable nor healthy. This is why Logitech has developed a very thin wrist rest, which is developed for very modern, thin, slim keyboards. Can you use a big wrist rest with a small keyboard? Yes, you can, because it will provide you with, say, a wrist rest for the mouse. Why not? But the idea is the same. The idea is you don't want to lean on it, you want to float on it. Okay, so this is on keyboards and wrist rests. Now let's go to mouses. Manufacturers have been very inventive with mouses. I mean, the mouse that we all know is the traditional mouse, big or small, whereby you have your hand flat on it. There are a few things there. First thing is you have to observe that the neutral position of your hands is like this. Yeah. So when I'm on a traditional mouse, I will tend to do that. Again, that's the story of my elbow being spread aside. Plus, I will tend to go there, and you see my carpal tunnel will rest on the desk. So this is, the double hazard with traditional mouses. This one is quite a small one. If you use it as a normal mouse, you will really cramp your fingers and that will be painful. Actually, I've learned from my Logitech friends that these type of mouses are meant to be used with just a fingertip, and you're actually supposed to kind of glide your hand on the desk. But again, we're talking about very gentle glide, because this is actually right the area of your carpal tunnel, so careful. So this is actually a mouse which is meant to be held just with the two fingers. We have other mouses that, let's say, put a lot of activity on one or a few fingers, and that includes the trackball. You see, this trackball keeps my hand fixed and everything happens with my thumb. For the rest, it is tiltable. It can be either flat, so risk that the elbow goes to the side, or it can be tilted, and that's much more comfortable. You have two buttons as always, or as most of the time, and different ones that you can program. You know from the video on the keyboard shortcuts that I don't like the scroll wheel. The scroll wheel makes your hand go like this, and this is not physiological. Your fingers are meant to go like this. So if you want to use the scroll wheel, okay, once in a while, but it should not be your main scrolling tool. Your main scrolling tool should be page up and page down. When do we use a trackball like this? Well, it has happened that I recommend it to people who have shoulder issues. We don't want their shoulder to move, so we have that. We put it at the optimum place for the shoulder, and then it doesn't move anymore. Now, the price to pay for your shoulder not to move is that the whole activity will happen in your thumb. So your thumb can easily get overloaded. Again, a great reason to learn a few keyboard shortcuts. Some people find this mouse a bit awkward, a bit slow, or imprecise. It can be. I would tend to agree, at least it's not easy to get used to it. What I've found useful though is a technique whereby I throw, you see, the ball like this. I don't try to control it all the way. I go like this, and this way I go much faster with the cursor. So this mouse would be very okay for someone with shoulder pain and with no hand pain, provided that, let's say, he or she gets used to it. The next big family that I want to touch is the family of vertical mouses. We have here a Logitech MX and here an Evoluent. They both have pros and cons. What I like with the MX is that it's not completely vertical, it's slightly diagonal, and this is really the neutral position of the hand, so it is super comfortable. You will observe that what rests on the table is not anymore my carpal tunnel, which is a sensitive surface, but this part here, which is much more solid. Remember that some karatekas break wood and stone with this part, so this one is quite strong. The Evoluent is more vertical, is really 90 degrees. So, you feel that you have to do a bit that, and that is, say, less comfortable. However, the big drawback of the MX Vertical is that it exists only in one size and only for the right-handed people. Okay, so if you have a very small hand, or if you're left-handed, this one will not do the job for you, and therefore Evoluent is a good alternative. Let's finish with the RollerMouse. The RollerMouse is a new concept. It's quite interesting because it's a different way of moving the cursor. You see, you have this central bar here, and when you roll it, you move the cursor up and down. When you slide it left and right, you can move the cursor to the left or to the right. So the good thing with this device is that you can really place it, you can really place your hand wherever you want. And if you use the version that has the small wrist rest, it doesn't push your keyboard too far forward. Now, the big drawback of this solution is its price. It's around $300. So it's really quite expensive, especially whenever you have a radically new concept like this. I mean, not everybody will be able to get used to it. Not everybody will be happy with it. And therefore, you really would like to test before you buy. Last type of device, this is not a touchpad, but it's to show you how a touchpad would be. This is a bamboo. It's an older device that was meant to be used with the stylus. You see, some people think that the touchpad is great because it's right in front of you. The issue is that what's neutral for your hand is not to work around your belly button, is to work here, yeah, in front of your elbow. So the touchpad can be okay if it's here, but if it's right in front of you, like you would have on a laptop, for example, what we call the central pointing device, check. Again, we get the elbow to the side and the shoulder gets straight. So, you know, touchpad, why not? Especially as you can, with certain finger movements, really have some nice, interesting shortcuts, but not as a central pointing device, rather as something which is right in front of your elbow.